The year is 1347. Deep beneath the stone castle of Baron Heinrich von Rothenburg, a woman's screams echo through chambers that haven't seen sunlight in decades. Her name was Lady Margaret, wife of a neighboring lord, accused of lying with a traveling merchant while her husband was at war. She hangs suspended in the center of a torch-lit dungeon, her wrists bound with iron chains that have already cut deep grooves into her flesh. Blood drips steadily onto the stone floor beneath her feet, creating a growing crimson pool that reflects the flickering flames. Her once beautiful face is now a mask of terror and pain, her golden hair matted with sweat and blood. The torturer, a massive man known only as the Questioner, approaches with a glowing iron rod heated in the brazier until it glows white-hot. "Confess your sins, woman," he growls, "and perhaps the Baron will grant you a quick death." But Lady Margaret knows there will be no mercy. She has seen what happens to women accused of adultery in these dungeons. She has heard their screams, smelled their burning flesh, watched their broken bodies carried out in pieces. The iron approaches her bare skin, and she can feel the heat radiating from it like the breath of hell itself. "Please," she gasps, "I am innocent. I never." The iron touches her shoulder, and her scream splits the air like a blade. The smell of burning flesh fills the chamber as the torturer holds the brand against her skin, counting slowly to 10 while she writhes in agony. This is just the beginning. There are 7 more brands to apply, one for each alleged meeting with her supposed lover. But Lady Margaret is fortunate compared to what awaits other women throughout history. What you're about to discover will shock you to your core. These aren't stories of quick executions or merciful deaths. These are accounts of systematic torture designed to break women's bodies and spirits in the most horrific ways imaginable. From the drowning cages of medieval Germany to the burning stakes of Spain, from the mutilation chambers of Rome to the stoning grounds of ancient Persia, women accused of adultery faced punishments so brutal that even hardened executioners sometimes refused to carry them out. Tonight, we journey through the darkest chapters of human cruelty, where accusations alone were death sentences, where torture was considered justice, and where women's screams provided entertainment for bloodthirsty crowds. What you're about to learn has been hidden from history books, sanitized by scholars, and forgotten by civilizations ashamed of their own barbarity. But the evidence remains. In archaeological sites across the world, we find the tools, the chambers, and the bones that tell the real story. Mass graves filled with women's remains, torture devices crafted with scientific precision, and detailed records of punishments so grotesque that chroniclers struggled to describe them fully. If you're ready to uncover history's most brutal truths, subscribe now, because this journey will change how you see the ancient world forever. 4,000 years ago in ancient Babylon, King Hammurabi carved laws into stone that would govern one of history's first great empires. But among his 282 laws, none were more brutal than those dealing with unfaithful women. Law 132 stated that if a woman was accused of adultery, she must throw herself into the river to let the gods decide her fate. But this wasn't just drowning, this was divine theater, where entire communities gathered to watch women die. Picture the scene along the banks of the Euphrates River. The accused woman is stripped naked and dragged before hundreds of spectators. Her hands are bound behind her back with rough rope that cuts into her wrists. Heavy stones are tied to her ankles to ensure she sinks quickly. The crowd jeers and throws rotting food as priests chant prayers to Marduk, the river god. Children are brought forward to witness what happens to bad women. The woman begs for mercy, proclaims her innocence, but her words are lost in the roar of the bloodthirsty mob. Then comes the moment of horror. She's not gently lowered into the water. She's thrown with force into the deepest, fastest part of the current. The stones drag her down immediately as she struggles desperately against her bonds. The crowd watches as her head disappears beneath the surface, as bubbles of her final breaths rise to the top. But here's the twisted cruelty. If by some miracle she survived, it proved her innocence, but her life was still destroyed, her property seized, her children taken, her reputation ruined forever. Survival meant living death in a community that had watched her thrown naked into the river. Archaeological evidence shows thousands of women died this way. Their skeletons found in river burial sites with bound wrists and ankle weights still attached. The practice spread throughout Mesopotamia and lasted for over 1,000 years. In ancient Rome, death was considered too merciful for adulteresses. Roman husbands preferred something more permanent: mutilation that would mark women forever as moral failures while keeping them alive as walking warnings. The process was ritualized and public in the Forum Romanum, surrounded by marble columns and cheering crowds. The accused woman would be held down by strong men while her husband took a sharp blade and sliced off her nose in one brutal cut. The blood would pour down her face as the crowd erupted in approval. But nose removal was just the beginning. Many husbands also cut off lips, ears, and eyelids, essentially erasing the woman's face while leaving her alive. One documented case from 67 CE describes Senator Marcus Crassus having his wife's entire face systematically destroyed. First her nose, then her lips cut from mouth to ear, creating a permanent skeletal grin. Finally, her eyelids were removed so she could never hide from the stares of those who judged her. The physician Galen documented treating women after such mutilations, describing infections that ate away remaining facial tissue. Women who could no longer eat because their mouths were too damaged. And suicide attempts by those who couldn't bear looking at their destroyed reflections. Without modern medicine, many died from blood loss or infection within days. Those who survived became outcasts, unable to work, marry, or even beg effectively, because their appearance was so disturbing that people fled rather than help them. Medieval Europe elevated the punishment of adulteresses to new heights of theatrical cruelty with burning alive. But this wasn't the quick death you might imagine. The condemned woman would first be subjected to days of torture to extract a confession. Red, hot pincers tore flesh from her arms and breasts. Iron boots crushed her feet. Water was forced down her throat until her stomach nearly burst. Then she'd be beaten to force it back up. On execution day, she'd be dressed in a shift covered with sulfur and pitched to ensure the flames would catch quickly and burn hotter. The crowd would gather in the town square, bringing food and ale like it was a festival. The wood was arranged with scientific precision, dry kindling at the bottom for quick ignition, green wood in the middle to create choking smoke, and more dry wood on top to ensure complete consumption of the body. As the flames rose, spectators would watch her skin blister and bubble. They'd smell her hair catch fire, that distinctive acrid scent that survivors never forgot. They'd hear her screams change as fire reached her throat, turning from human cries to animal sounds, and finally to silence. But skilled executioners knew how to prolong the agony. They'd use wet wood to create more smoke and less heat, causing slow suffocation. They'd position the woman higher so flames would burn her legs first, while leaving vital organs intact longer. In 1431, Joan of Arc faced this fate, but her execution was botched deliberately. The executioner used green wood to prolong her suffering, and witnesses reported she remained conscious and screaming for over 30 minutes as flames slowly consumed her body. In the Islamic world, stoning became the preferred method for punishing adultery, and it was designed to be a community event, where everyone participated in the killing. The woman would be buried up to her chest in the ground, unable to run or even fall over. The stones had to be precisely sized, not so small they'd merely cause pain, but not so large they'd kill quickly with a single blow. Hundreds of people would gather, each holding their chosen stone. The first would be thrown by the accuser. Then the crowd would unleash a barrage of rocks that struck the woman's head, face, and arms as she tried desperately to protect herself with bound hands. The medical reality is horrific. Repeated impacts cause massive internal bleeding, broken bones, and traumatic brain injury. But death comes slowly. Women often stopped screaming not from death, but from jaw fractures that made vocalization impossible, while they remained conscious and feeling every impact. Contemporary accounts describe the wet sounds of tissue tearing, bones cracking, and blood-filling lungs. Some victims survived hundreds of stones before finally succumbing, their bodies so destroyed they were unrecognizable as human. In Imperial China, adulteresses faced having their already bound feet rebroken and rebound in positions designed to maximize pain and ensure permanent disability. Normal foot binding was already torture, but for adulteresses, the process went far beyond cultural practice. Their feet would be rebroken in multiple places, toes folded completely under and bound so tightly they'd eventually rot off from lack of circulation. The process was done slowly over weeks, with bindings tightened daily. Women would feel their bones grinding against each other, flesh slowly dying, infections setting in as tissue died. The smell of rotting flesh would fill their rooms. Many lost entire portions of their feet to gangrene, becoming prisoners in their own homes, dependent on families for survival, while serving as living reminders of what happened to unfaithful wives. Medieval Europe's most sadistic innovation was the drowning cage, iron cages, designed to maximize the horror of drowning through repeated near-death experiences. The woman would be locked naked in a form-fitting iron cage and slowly lowered into water. First the feet, then knees, waist, chest, each stage building terror as she watched death approach. When water reached her neck, the real horror began. The cage would be submerged until she nearly drowned, then raised for a few gasping breaths, then lowered again. This cycle could repeat dozens of times, each drowning lasting longer as she weakened. Live burial was even worse. Women were forced to dig their own graves, then buried alive while conscious, feeling earth pressing down as they suffocated slowly in complete darkness. These weren't isolated incidents or ancient barbarism. They were systematic, legal, and celebrated for thousands of years. From Babylon to medieval Europe, from Rome to China, women faced torture that defied human comprehension for the crime of alleged unfaithfulness. The evidence remains in archaeological sites, legal codes, and detailed records that chroniclers struggled to document fully. These punishments weren't about justice, they were about control through terror, keeping half the population in submission through spectacular displays of cruelty.